Grateful to be asked to share at this meeting. Thank you, Jack, for your lead, Jen, for asking me to speak, and everybody that's part of this meeting. It's truly an honor. Deanna, there's nothing that I could add to your share. Basically, we could have just stopped there because I fully identified with your share. You literally said my story. And I think that that's one of the big messages to carry is if you haven't heard your story, don't leave yet because you will hear your story. And just listening to the baseline emotions of what Deanna described, like everything was hit on the head. Like everything you mentioned, the last reading that you read just resonated so much with me because, my sobriety started with the 12th step in somebody else's heart, right? And I have to carry that because the only way I stay sober is by paying it forward. What was so freely given to me, I have to give so freely back. So just a little bit of background on me. So uh, I have a sobriety date, which is the 31st of May, 2014. So God willing, this month as well, I will be celebrating 7 years. Congratulations on your four. That's big. It's awesome. And congratulations, everybody that's coming back has a little bit of time. You're worth it. So keep coming back. I have a home group. It's called Golden Slippers, which I share with another person on the screen. It's been my home group for quite a long time. And the most important facet of my recovery is that I work with others. And that's really made my life very, very whole. The funny thing about your meeting is that it's the fifth dimension, which means that, like, I feel like, there was always something like spiritually lacking from a really, really young age with me. And I never figured out that it was this gaping hole in my soul, as we call it in recovery. So if I take you back a little bit, I'll try to like speak a little bit slowly as well, because I just realized that there's the interpreter as well. So I want everybody to kind of understand the message that I'm trying to give, but I may I may falter. Um, and yeah, from the youngest age, I mean, I'm the youngest of four kids that are immigrants to Montreal. My parents and the rest of my family were born in Singapore. I was born in Paris, and as soon as I was born, from an earliest age, I felt like the outsider. I thought that I was a mistake since I was the youngest kid. They had all their kids in Singapore, and growing up feeling like you're a mistake is like not a good thing, especially not for an addict. And the instability too of like moving different countries, definitely heightened by anxiety. And I know that nobody suffers with anxiety that's in this room, and it's like an outside issue, but that definitely didn't help neither. So really anxious kid, moved to Montreal, very dysfunctional family. We're all in a basement in Angrignon Park, which is like a really sketchy part of Montreal back in the 80s. And yeah, we're just like, it's just like 100 miles per hour, this dysfunction. And moved to the suburbs when my dad saves up enough money, and from there the isms start to manifest. And these isms, I call them my interior spiritual malady, whether it's deception, manipulation, lying, cheating, doing everything for you to like me, people please, like I didn't have an identity, had low self-esteem as well, and I'm just trying to get people to like me. And like, it's that hole in my soul that I'm talking about, that I'm trying to fill it in with people, places, and things, right? My first drink comes when we moved to Australia. Like, my dad would pick up contracts all over the world. He's a chef, and we'd move with him so that he could further his contracts, which caused a lot of instability, like I mentioned before. And I remember taking a drink and thinking that this liquid in this can was going to resolve what was going on in here. And when I took that sip, like, I was like, I'm onto something. Like, the obsession, the mental obsession started from there. I was like 12 years old, and I was off to the races. I was like, we have to figure out when to do this again, right? 13th birthday rolls around. I get busted by my mom with like a backpack full of like those miniature bottles of alcohol that you get in the plane. And my mom decides to ship me to the Caribbean to join my dad that's now in the Caribbean. And she's like, yeah, okay, we don't want you going down that path. So she ships me to the Caribbean, which is like full of rum, right? And Corona under docks. So that was not the best idea. And I remember being on a field trip, and this is my first drunk. We get off the plane, I grabbed one bottle of rum, like I negotiated with and I bartered and I got two bottles of rum. So one for all the other students and one for myself, because that's how I drink by myself. One to oblivion, right? Right away. As fast as I could, I chugged it down. They shared it. And then they started laughing at me and they started like I became a fool and I was the center of attention. And like it says in the big book, I had arrived. And I chased that feeling all of my, as you said it so eloquently, drinking career. All of my drinking career, I chased that feeling, that dopamine rush, that whatever you want to call it. I chased that. I finally belonged. And the end of that night was not so illustrious because I ended up naked running around the compound, which I did a lot when I was drunk because, you get hot and like you just want to take stuff off. I know that's never happened to anybody neither. Um, and I puked my guts out and I made a total fool of myself. And I woke up the next morning, and this is what distinguishes me from a normal drinker and makes me an alcoholic. I wanted to do it all over again as fast as possible. As I got older, my anxiety started getting worse and worse. I had my first panic attack at my prom, which is a really joyous event, which is a fantastic time for a panic attack to pop up. So here I am thinking that I'm dying, and like my friends are looking at me, and I'm like pale and like my heart's palpitating, and I'm cold, but I'm hot, and like my abdomen feels like everybody thought I was dying. And the only thing I can think of doing in that moment is reaching across from me at the Heineken bottle and downing it as fast as possible. And my anxiety subsides. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a really good fix. Let's do this for another 10 years. And I did that for 10 years. I self-medicated my anxiety with alcohol, which evidently stops working, which is why we're all here for most of us. And yeah, like every time I'd have these really, really like big buildups of anxiety, I would drink and I would, medicate. I worked in the restaurant industry for 15 years, uh, 4 of those sober, not necessarily recommended, but it's possible. As somebody said before, there are possibilities. It's possible to do it. And that really accelerated my drinking and my bottom, like all these, well, basically in Montreal, how it works, we're actually the only province that allows their servers to drink. So you're actually allowed to drink with your customers and you're encouraged to. So they buy you shot, you just get wasted throughout your shift. And everywhere else, it's like criminal to do that. Some people get away with it, but it's actually here, like it's really encouraged. So that being said, I would steal, I would skim off the top, I would be really, really, like I'm the only guy probably in Montreal that was a bartender that got fired for drinking. Like you're a bartender. Like how do you lose that? How do you go on probation for drinking being a bartender? I still can't figure that out. And I was losing these really, really good jobs, and people were telling me that I was drinking too much. My family was worried. Was in a toxic relationship. We'd always have arguments around my drinking as well. And I decided, like, eventually, like, okay, like it all came to a heads where I decided to stop drinking for 3 months. And I had the brilliant idea because, like, my MO was I was either getting fired or I would quit to like preserve my reputation, to like look good, which is basically the ego on like a million. And I decided to take a break from drinking, which is white knuckling it. And at the same time, to go work in a nightclub. So you guys already see where this is going. And I'm telling people about the benefits of not drinking while they're getting trash next to me and we're in a nightclub. Oh my God, how do you do it, Vijay? Like, how is it possible? And I'm on my high horse. And the more you build yourself up, the further you're going to fall, right? And I start deceiving myself and I start thinking that it might be okay to take a drink. And I start sneaking these little coffee cups of gin tonics under the bar. And I have one the first night, and I've never had one drink in my life except for that night. And I fooled everybody, and we went out even afterwards, and I like drank bottles of Perrier, and I was like, I'm still not drinking. And I got home and I was like, good job, man. You only had one. Like, you have control. Like, this is good. You're on the right track. So the next night, I repeated the experiment with 2 gin tonics, and I got through it. So same thing, come home, good job. So I'm really good at math. So the next night, I decided to experiment with 10 gin tonics. And I had 10, I swear. I drank 10 gin tonics, got home, patted myself on the back, and the next night you figured it out. I was off to the races, bottle, bottle, bottle. 3 weeks in a row, I didn't draw a sober breath. Couldn't go 12 hours without drinking. I was shaking uncontrollably. I would eat every 2 or 3 days because nothing would go down and stay down. So I'd eat those little like wraps that you can get like in the corner stores, like they're really, really chemical. And that's like once every 3 days. Wake up in the morning, like passed out on the sofa, fully dressed, reach over the coffee table. Is the phone there, the keys there, the wallet there? Okay, cool. We didn't lose anything. All of these like melted glasses, I'd have to like drink all of those bottoms, walk by the freezer, pull out the vodka bottle, take a swig just to be able to take a shower because you're shaking too much, can't shower and shave. Do that before heading out the door to go do my shift, chain smoke 3 cigarettes to the metro. Because of the anxiety, I can't take the metro without being at least a little bit in the bag and without the nicotine. And get into work and start drinking all the way through the shift. And that's it. My last 3 weeks of drinking was just that rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. So, like, I mean, if I try to romanticize my drinking and go back to the good days, like, there aren't. Like, that's what my drinking looked like: isolated, like, very painful, suffering constantly. And the last night that I drank, my best friend who owned one of my best friends who owned the club, actually, he's been sober for 15 years. And I'd been drinking and he pinned me up against a wall and he said, like the rule that when you came to work here was that you stopped drinking. Like you wouldn't drink. That's what you did when you started working. You can't drink. And I couldn't understand what he was trying to say, but essentially he told me that I was going to die if I kept drinking this way. I had planned a geographical, which is moving to another place because this is the problem and I have to move somewhere else, knowing very well that I'm bringing the problem with me, which is me. And 5 days later, I was leaving to Singapore, which is 16,000 kilometers away. It's quite a far stretch, which is not recommended neither. And he's telling me, like, you're going to die in Singapore if you keep doing this. And I don't understand. So I cop a resentment. He fires me, basically. I leave. I keep drinking. I drunk text him, which I know none of us have done neither. And this is pre iPhone. So this is like a flip phone, like where you have to like close one eye to like see the characters so they're not too blurred. And I'm like drunk texting him like all night. And when I wake up the next morning, because I drank to oblivion, I fell down the stairs, I concussed myself again, which is all part of my MO, like waking up in snowbanks, concussed, getting thrown out of taxis, all of that good stuff, because it's very glamorous. Once again, if I try to romanticize, it doesn't work. I wake up full of shame and guilt, which are my two best friends, right? And I look at my phone and I look at all my drunk texts and I read one of his texts back and it says that he can't be held responsible for my relapse. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about, a relapse? Like, does he think I'm an alcoholic or something? And I said it, and my partner at the time is sitting on the bed. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. It's the first time I've ever said that. And just saying it, like a weight was lifted. And we're both bawling our eyes out. And for 2.5 years, I'd had a meeting list, like a Montreal AA meeting list, AA, on my bedside table. My mom had brought it for me from like a medical center because she was really worried. The first time I saw it, like 2 years previous, I'd opened it up. There's the 12 questions. And I answered like the first three. Then I look at the bottom and it says, if you have 4 of these items, you might consider getting help. So I stopped there, evidently. I was like, that's enough for that. And that day I opened it up and I answered the first 11 questions and they were all yes, 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 yes. And I didn't need to get to the 12th one because I already knew that I was an alcoholic. And I also knew that there was a solution. So I went to my first meeting. Not to lie, I hated my first meeting. Evidently, I showed up late and I left early, which means that it doesn't give anybody a chance to talk to you or do any service. But there's this woman that caught that I was leaving to Singapore. And she's like, it's really not a good idea to like travel this early in your recovery. Like, I took my beginner's chip. So she was like, probably not a good idea. But if you have to, she bought me a book, Living Sober, and she gave it to me. She didn't even know me like 10 minutes. She was an out of towner, Montreal meeting, out of the goodness of her heart, just bought me a book and gave it to me. And that book, man, held me, it like saved me. Really small chapters. It's the only thing that functioned at that time. And I read that and I left to Singapore. And I was 5 days sober. I got there. My partner said, just focus on your recovery, go to meetings, figure out where they are. I'll take care of the rest. My meetings were an hour and a half away from where I was living, an hour and a half back, 1 hour of service and 1 hour of meetings. So 5 hours. I would leave her in the apartment, foreign country, go do 3 meetings a week. Like, evidently, I have the best partner ever, and she's amazing, and like a great part of my recovery. And 3 months later, I mean, the whole Singapore thing didn't work out. We ended up coming back here. And the first thing I did, and it's not to toot my own horn, I went to Golden Slippers that night. I think I got off the plane at like 4:30 or 5 in the afternoon, like super like neurotic and like super tired. And literally just like HP carried me there. And I heard the prayer being said for the first time, like, and for some reason, like really loudly, and it like burnt a hole in my ears. And it was like, God. And I was like, oh my God, this is a sect. This is what it is. This is my opportunity to never come back here. And I was about to leave, and a guy got up, basically told me the same thing that he told Diana, which is just come in. He grabbed me by the arm. He was like flame tattoos, stretches in his ears, like 250 pounds, grabs me, sits me next to him. He's just like, shut up and listen, you'll be fine. And that's what I did, man. He saved my life, sacrificed, like he's no longer with us, and he went back out. So, and he died. So like I take that really, really seriously, I got into service. I started chairing meetings. I got 4 home groups. I was working 70 hours a week in the restaurant industry, out of whack, out of balance, but still not so defeated as to ask somebody to be my sponsor and work the steps with somebody else. Like that wasn't about to do yet. And I was sitting on a beach in Honduras doing my steps by myself because they're all we steps. But for some reason, I just read Vijay, 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 Vijay. Like it was just all I, like didn't read we to me. And then I get to step 5. It's like, you have to share this with somebody else. And I'm like, oh, I've been wasting my time. Ah. And literally I go back to Montreal. The first meeting I go to is the Tuesday meeting, which is a speaker meeting, Shadows. And Andrew's sharing it. I'm like, oh, this is a coincidence. This is the guy that I wanted to ask to be my sponsor like months before. And I go to the Wednesday meeting. It's called Safe Haven, and Andrew's sharing at that meeting. I'm like, okay, this is really weird, like 2 days in a row. And I go to Friday Finchley, which is his home group, and Andrew's sharing at that meeting too. I'm like, yo. And this is why there's no coincidence in AA. There's God. Like I've learned that I've seen a lot of these things occur. So I ask him to be my sponsor. We go through the steps, which is a beautiful process. And he says, now give it to others. You have to work with others. You want to stay sober, you've got to work with others. And I caught on to that because, I'm not keeping myself sober. When I'm working with another alcoholic, I afford myself that opportunity to stay sober though. And throughout the years, there's been like really, really cool stuff. I changed industries. I work in recovery nowadays. So I work with kids. I give workshops on addictions in high schools, and that wouldn't be possible if I wasn't sober. By far, one of the greatest things is my relationship with my wife, who was my partner before. So she's seen the before and after, and we're still together. And, we've been together for 9 years, married for 5. I got married in recovery. The day before I got married, I shared at a meeting. And everybody was like, what the hell are you doing here? I'm like, I'm exactly where I need to be. A afforded me this life. I have the greatest little baby in life right here, my sobriety dog. And he's been there for me through my challenges too. Was able to seek outside help. I was able to ask for help again and again in recovery, because it's not because you're in recovery that you're not going to need help again, and you're not going to go to your knees again and have to ask again. I've had sponsees that have told me, to rework my 3rd step, to rework my 11th step, talk about humility, patience, tolerance. And it's just a great thing. And that's why I call it working with others. Like I don't like this whole sponsorship terms because there's like hierarchy, but I work with my dudes, and they afford me a good chance of staying sober. So it's been a really, really cool journey. And And that's it. I'm just learning to enjoy the journey, because the dream isn't like what comes after it or this point in the horizon. The dream is living it, you know, is being able to wake up and have a life today that's beyond my wildest dreams. And a lot of us shouldn't be here, you know, and yet we are. So we have something to give back. I'll leave you with this, you know, like there's a lot of things in AA that I don't necessarily agree with or don't necessarily like all the time. And one of those concepts is that you're an arm's length away from a drink. I believe that if you've been in the program, you've worked your steps, worked with others, and you have sponsorship, that you're actually 12 steps away from a drink. You got to be unwilling to work with other people and to recover yourself. You got to be unwilling to take that prayer and meditation and seek a higher power's guidance. You've got to be unwilling to promptly admit that you were wrong and make amends. You've got to be unwilling to make amends to others, directly or otherwise. You have to be unwilling to make those lists, for example, character defects and all the amends that you have to make. You have to be unwilling to share that inventory with somebody, right? And your higher power. Unwilling to make that searching and more fearless and moral inventory of yourself. Unwilling to find a higher power that you understand yourself. Unwilling to believe that he can restore you to sanity. And then where do you fall? Step one, where you start thinking that it might be a good idea to take a drink. My name is Vijay. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great 24.